In the heart of a bustling city, where shiny skyscrapers towered over narrow streets filled with life, there was a small boy named Arjun. He lived in one of those tiny shacks made from rusted iron sheets that leaned precariously against each other. The neighborhood wasn't glamorous, far from it, but it had its own rhythm. Street vendors shouted about fresh vegetables, kids played cricket on dusty roads, and old men sat outside tea stalls exchanging stories. But for Arjun, life wasn't easy. Arjun was only 14 years old, but he carried responsibilities far beyond his age. His mother worked long hours as a housemaid, cleaning rich people's homes so they could send him to school. Despite their struggles, she always told him, "Education will change our lives." So every morning, Arjun would walk miles to attend classes at a government school, wearing the same faded uniform patched up countless times. After school, instead of playing like other children, he wandered through alleys and garbage bins searching for anything valuable, empty bottles, scrap metal, or even discarded clothes that he could sell for a few coins. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting orange hues across the sky, Arjun found himself near an abandoned construction site. It was a place he avoided during the day because workers often chased away scavengers like him. But now, silence enveloped the area, broken only by the distant hum of traffic. As he rummaged through piles of debris, something shiny caught his eye. Hidden beneath a pile of dirt and rubble was a sleek smartphone. Its screen gleamed faintly under the dim streetlight. Curious, Arjun picked it up. At first glance, the phone looked brand new, untouched by time or wear. For someone like Arjun, who had never owned anything more than a basic feature phone, this gadget felt almost magical. He pressed the power button, half expecting it to be dead. To his surprise, the screen lit up instantly. No password, no lock screen, just open access to everything inside. At first, Arjun hesitated. Wasn't taking someone else's property wrong? But then again, maybe whoever lost it wouldn't miss it. Or perhaps they'd already given up looking for it. Either way, curiosity got the better of him. He tapped around, opening folders and apps, trying to understand what kind of person this belonged to. That's when he stumbled upon the photo gallery. The first few pictures seemed ordinary enough. Landscapes, food snaps, random selfies. Then came a series of images that stopped Arjun cold. One particular photo showed him walking home from school, his backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. He remembered that day clearly. It had been raining lightly and he'd taken off his shoes to cross a flooded patch of road. There he was, captured unknowingly, staring back at himself from the screen. His heart raced. Who took this picture, and why? Flipping through more photos, Arjun noticed a pattern. Most of them featured children all around his age from different parts of the city. Some were smiling, some looked lost, while others appeared scared. None of them seemed aware they were being photographed. Arjun couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling creeping into his chest. Why would anyone take secret pictures of strangers? Determined to figure out whose phone this was, Arjun scrolled through the contacts list. Names like Guardian, Watcher, and Project Phoenix popped up, none of which sounded normal. Then he spotted one labeled simply as Mom. Maybe this person could tell him what was going on. With trembling fingers, Arjun jotted down the number and decided to call it later, using a borrowed phone. Until then, he tucked the mysterious device safely into his pocket, vowing to return it to its rightful owner, or uncover the truth behind its contents. As he walked back home, the weight of the phone in his pocket felt heavier than ever. Little did Arjun know, this discovery would lead him down a path full of danger, mystery, and revelations that would change his life forever. The next morning, Arjun woke up earlier than usual. His mind was still buzzing with questions about the phone and the strange pictures he had found. He couldn't shake off the eerie feeling that someone had been watching him. And not just him, but other kids too. Who were these people? Why were they taking photos of children without their knowledge? And what did it all mean? After finishing his morning chores and helping his mother prepare breakfast, Arjun decided to dig deeper into the phone's contents. Sitting on a broken stool outside their shack, he carefully pulled out the device from his pocket. The sunlight reflected off its shiny surface, making it look almost alien compared to everything else around him. He scrolled through the apps again, hoping to find something, anything, that might give him answers. The Messages app was empty, which seemed odd. Most people left traces of conversations behind, but this phone was completely clean, as if someone had wiped it intentionally. Still, there were plenty of photos and contacts saved in the phone book. Arjun went through the list once more, trying to make sense of the cryptic names like Guardian and Watcher. They didn't sound like regular people you'd chat with or meet for coffee. Something about them felt cold and calculated, sending shivers down his spine. Then his eyes landed on one name. Mom. It stood out because it felt so normal, so human amidst all the weird labels. Maybe this person could explain why there were secret pictures of him and other kids. Taking a deep breath, Arjun borrowed his neighbor's old phone, a battered flip phone that barely worked, and dialed the number listed under Mom. The call connected after a few rings. A woman's voice answered, soft but tinged with exhaustion. "Hello?" she said cautiously. Hello?" Arjun stammered, unsure how to start. "I think I found your son's phone." There was a pause followed by an audible gasp. "You found Rohan's phone?" the woman asked, her tone shifting from surprise to urgency. "Where is it? Is it safe?" "Yes, ma'am, it's safe," Arjun replied quickly. "But I need to ask you something. Do you know why there are pictures of me on it? Pictures taken without me knowing?" Another pause, this time longer. When the woman spoke again, her voice cracked slightly, as though she was holding back tears. "Listen, I can't talk about this over the phone. Can we meet somewhere, please? It's important." Arjun hesitated. Meeting strangers wasn't something he did lightly, especially when the situation already felt so strange. But the desperation in the woman's voice made him reconsider. She sounded scared, maybe even more scared than he was. Finally, he agreed. "Okay," he said. "Where should we meet?" She suggested a small cafe near the market, a place Arjun knew well because his mother sometimes bought groceries nearby. They set a time for later that afternoon, and Arjun hung up, his heart pounding. What had he gotten himself into? When Arjun arrived at the cafe, he spotted her immediately. She was sitting alone at a corner table, nervously tapping her fingers against a cup of tea. Her clothes were neat and expensive-looking, unlike anything Arjun usually saw in his neighborhood. She looked tired, though, dark circles under her eyes, her hair tied back in a messy bun. As he approached, she looked up and gave him a weak smile. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "My name is Mira. Rohan is my son." Arjun nodded politely, clutching the phone tightly in his hands. "Here's the phone," he said, sliding it across the table toward her. "But before I give it back, I need to understand something. Why does it have pictures of me? And why are there photos of other kids too?" Mira sighed heavily, running a hand through her hair. For a moment she seemed lost in thought, struggling to find the right words. Then she began speaking slowly, choosing each word carefully. "Rohan has been missing for 2 weeks," she said finally. Her voice trembled, and Arjun could see tears forming in her eyes. "The police say he ran away, but I don't believe that. Not my Rohan. He wouldn't just leave without telling me." Arjun listened silently, his stomach tightening. Missing kids weren't uncommon in his part of the city, but hearing it firsthand made it feel more real, more painful. "I've been looking everywhere for him," Mira continued. "This phone was his last connection to me. I hoped it would lead me to him somehow, but when you mentioned the pictures," she trailed off, shaking her head. "It makes me think there's something bigger going on, something dangerous." "What do you mean?" Arjun asked, leaning forward slightly. Mira hesitated, glancing around the cafe to ensure no one was listening. Then she lowered her voice. "I don't know much, but I've heard rumors about certain groups targeting children, taking them for reasons no one understands. At first I thought it was just gossip, but now..." She glanced at the phone on the table. "Those pictures, they're not random. Someone is watching you, Arjun. Watching all of you." A cold chill ran down Arjun's spine. He wanted to dismiss her words as paranoia, but the evidence was right there in front of him. The photos, the strange contacts, the way Mira spoke. With such conviction, it all pointed to something sinister. "We need to find out who's behind this," Mira said firmly, determination replacing her earlier fear. "If we can figure out where Rohan is, maybe we can stop whatever they're planning." Arjun swallowed hard. He hadn't expected any of this when he picked up the phone. All he'd wanted to do was return it to its owner. Now he was being dragged into a mystery that seemed far beyond his understanding. But as he looked at Mira's tear-streaked face, he realized he couldn't turn away. If there was even a chance he could help bring Rohan home, or protect others like him, he had to try. "Okay," Arjun said quietly. "What do we do next?" Mira smiled faintly, gratitude flickering in her eyes. "First, we trace Rohan's steps. There might be clues in the phone's data, locations, timestamps, anything that tells us where he went last. But we have to be careful. Whoever took him, they'll be watching too." As they left the cafe together, Arjun couldn't help but glance over his shoulder. The streets felt different now, darker somehow, as if shadows lurked in every corner. Whatever lay ahead, he knew it wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in his life, Arjun felt like he had a purpose, one that went beyond surviving day by day. The next morning, Arjun woke up with a heavy feeling in his chest. He hadn't slept much the previous night, his mind racing with thoughts about Rohan, the mysterious phone, and Mira's warning. The idea that someone, or some group, was watching him and other kids felt like something out of a movie. But this wasn't fiction, it was real. And now, he had willingly stepped into the middle of it. Mira had asked him to meet her early at her house, promising they'd go through the phone together to find any clues about Rohan's whereabouts. Arjun didn't know what to expect from her home. From the way she dressed and spoke, he guessed she came from a wealthy family. But when he arrived at her doorstep, he realized just how different their worlds were. Her house stood tall behind a wrought iron gate, surrounded by lush greenery. It was nothing like the cramped alleys and crumbling shacks Arjun called home. When Mira opened the door, she looked even more tired than before, her eyes red-rimmed as if she hadn't slept either. She ushered him inside without saying much, leading him to a spacious living room filled with elegant furniture. A framed photo on the wall caught Arjun's attention. It showed a smiling teenage boy standing beside Mira. That must be Rohan, he thought. In the picture, he looked happy, carefree, completely unaware of the trouble that awaited him. "Let's get started," Mira said, sitting down on the couch and pulling out the phone. "We need to check everything, the photos, the apps, the location history, anything that might tell us where Rohan went." Arjun nodded and joined her, his fingers trembling slightly as he took the phone. He felt nervous touching something so important, knowing it might hold the key to finding Rohan. Together, they began scrolling through the device again, this time paying closer attention to details they might have missed earlier. They started with the photos. There were dozens of them, each one showing a different child. Some pictures were taken in broad daylight, others at dusk or dawn. Most of the kids looked ordinary, just regular boys and girls going about their daily lives. But there was something unsettling about the way the photos were framed. Each shot seemed deliberate, almost clinical, as though the photographer wasn't interested in capturing moments but rather studying their subjects. "This isn't normal," Mira muttered under her breath, shaking her head. "These aren't random snapshots. Whoever took these pictures, they were planning something." "What do you think they wanted?" Arjun asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," Mira admitted, her tone heavy with worry. "But it can't be good. Look, at this one." She pointed to a photo of a girl sitting alone on a park bench, staring off into the distance. She looks scared, like she knows someone's watching her. Arjun swallowed hard, trying to push away the unease building inside. Him. He couldn't stop thinking about how he'd been photographed too, walking home from school, completely oblivious to the camera trained on him. What if whoever took those pictures had followed him? What if they were still watching? Next, They checked the phone's location history. To their surprise, the feature was turned on, revealing a trail of places Rohan had visited in the days leading up to his disappearance. The map showed frequent visits to certain areas, a quiet park near the outskirts of the city, an old warehouse by the river, and even a few spots close to Arjun's neighborhood. None of these locations seemed connected, but they all shared one thing in common. They were isolated, far from crowds and prying eyes. "There's something else," Mira said suddenly, her voice sharp with urgency. She had been scrolling through the contacts list again and stopped at a name labeled Project Phoenix. When she tapped on it, a series of notes appeared, written in shorthand that made little sense at first glance. Words like subjects, traits, and testing jumped out at them, sending chills down both their spines. "What does this mean?" Arjun asked, his heart pounding faster. Mira shook her head, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the notes. "I don't know exactly, but it sounds bad. Really bad. These terms, they're not casual, they sound scientific, like someone's conducting experiments." "Experiments?" Arjun echoed, his voice cracking. "On kids?" "It's possible," Mira replied grimly. "And if that's true, then Rohan might be in serious danger." The weight of her words hung in the air. Between them, Arjun felt sick to his stomach, imagining what could be happening to Rohan, and to others like him. He wanted to believe this was all some terrible misunderstanding, but deep down, he knew better. The evidence was right there in front of them, undeniable and chilling. "We need to investigate further," Mira said finally, breaking the silence. "But we can't do it alone. If we're dealing with people capable of abducting children and running secret operations, we'll need help." "Who can we trust?" Arjun asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "If what you're saying is true, then even the police might be involved." "You're right," Mira agreed. "We can't rely on anyone official, but I know someone who might be able to guide us, an old friend of mine. She works with activists who fight against child exploitation. They've dealt with cases like this before." Arjun hesitated. Trusting strangers wasn't easy, especially when the stakes were so high. But what choice did they have? Sitting around and waiting wasn't an option. Not when Rohan's life, and possibly others, was at risk. "Okay," Arjun said finally, nodding. "Let's talk to your friend. But we have to be careful. If someone's watching us—" "They are," Mira interrupted, her expression grim. "I'm sure of it. Which means we need to move quickly and quietly." Over the next hour, Mira made a few calls, speaking in hushed tones to ensure no one overheard. By the time she finished, she had arranged a meeting with her friend for later that evening. Until then, they decided to lay low, avoiding anything that might draw attention to themselves. As Arjun walked back home, his mind swirled with questions and fears. He kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see someone following him. Every shadow, every passerby felt suspicious. For the first time in his life, he realized how vulnerable he truly was, and how much bigger the world was than he'd ever imagined. But despite the fear gnawing at him, Arjun also felt a spark of determination. He had always been told he was powerless, just another faceless kid struggling to survive in a harsh world. Yet here he was, holding a phone that contained secrets capable of exposing evil. Maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of deep orange and purple. Arjun sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the cracked wall in front of him. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Mira's warnings, the mysterious photos, and the looming danger that seemed to grow heavier with every passing moment. He couldn't shake off the feeling that someone was watching him, even though he was alone in the dimly lit room. Every creak of the wooden floor outside, every distant shout from the street made him jump. Mira had arranged for them to meet her activist friend later that evening at a quiet cafe tucked away in a less crowded part of the city. But until then, they needed to stay cautious. She had warned Arjun not to tell anyone about what they were doing, not his mother, not his friends, no one. "Trust is a luxury we can't afford right now," she had said firmly. So Arjun kept quiet, pretending everything was normal while inside. His heart raced like a drum. When the time came, Mira picked him up in a car, a sleek, black sedan that looked completely out of place in their neighborhood. Kids stopped playing, cricket to stare as it rolled slowly down the narrow lane. Arjun slid into the passenger seat, clutching the phone tightly in his hand. The weight of it felt heavier than ever, as if it carried all the secrets of the world within its smooth surface. "You ready?" Mira asked gently, glancing at him before pulling back onto the main road. Arjun nodded, though he didn't feel ready at all. How could anyone prepare for something like this? Still, he forced himself to take a deep breath and focus. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Rohan, and maybe even other kids whose lives were at risk. The cafe where they met Mira's friend was small and cozy, with soft lighting and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingering in the air. A woman in her late 20s stood near the counter, scanning the room anxiously. Her hair was tied back in a loose bun, and she wore simple clothes, a plain kurta paired with jeans. But there was an intensity in her eyes that caught Arjun's attention immediately. This was someone who meant business. "This is Priya," Mira introduced her quietly as they approached. "She's been working with activists fighting against child exploitation for years." Priya nodded briskly, shaking both their hands. "I've heard enough from Mira to know this is serious," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Let's sit somewhere private." They chose a corner table far from the other customers, huddling close together as Priya listened intently to their story. When Arjun showed her the phone, the photos, the cryptic notes, the location history, her expression grew darker with each passing minute. By the end, she leaned back in her chair, exhaling sharply. "This isn't just trafficking," she said finally, her tone grave. "It's worse. These people aren't just kidnapping kids, they're experimenting on them." "What kind of experiments?" Arjun asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know yet," Priya admitted. "But terms like traits and testing suggest they're looking for specific qualities in these children. Maybe physical abilities, maybe intelligence, something valuable enough to exploit." "But why target kids?" Mira interjected, her voice trembling slightly. "Why my Rohan?" "Because children are easier to control," Priya replied bluntly, "and because whatever they're doing might require long-term commitment. If they start young, they can mold them however they want." Arjun felt sick. Mold them? What did that even mean? Were they turning kids into, what, soldiers? Lab rats? The thought made his stomach churn. "We need proof," Priya continued. "Solid evidence we can use to expose them. Without that, no one will believe us, not the police, not the media, no one." "And how do we get proof?" Arjun asked, his voice tinged with desperation. Priya hesitated, glancing at Mira before answering. "We go to the source. The warehouse by the river. You said that's one of the places Rohan visited frequently, right? That's our best bet. If we can sneak in and gather information, we might be able to piece together what's really going on." Arjun's heart sank. Sneak in? Into a place run by dangerous people? It sounded impossible and terrifying. But what choice did they have? That night, under the cover of darkness, Arjun and Mira followed Priya's instructions to reach the old warehouse. It loomed ahead of them like a ghostly silhouette, its broken windows reflecting the pale moonlight. The area around it was deserted, save for a few stray dogs barking in the distance. As they crept closer, Arjun's pulse quickened. Every step felt like it echoed loudly in the silence, giving away their presence. Priya had given them basic tools to help: small flashlights, gloves, and a hidden camera disguised as a pen. "Stick to the shadows," she had warned. "If you see anyone, hide immediately. Don't engage, just observe." Arjun clutched the pen camera tightly, his palms sweaty despite the cool night air. They circled the building cautiously, looking for a way in. Finally, they found a rusted side door that creaked open with minimal effort. Inside, the warehouse was eerily quiet, except for the occasional drip of water from a leaky pipe somewhere above. The faint smell of chemicals lingered in the air, making Arjun's nose itch. They moved deeper into the space, sticking close to the walls. Then suddenly, They heard voices. Low murmurs floated toward them from behind a closed door at the far end of the hall. Heart pounding, Arjun gestured for Mira to stay put while he inched closer to listen. Peering through a crack in the door, Arjun saw a group of men seated around a large table littered with papers and laptops. One man wore a lab coat. His glasses perched precariously on the tip of his nose as he typed furiously on a keyboard. Another man, dressed in an expensive suit, leaned back in his chair, speaking in clipped tones. These subjects show promising results, the suited man said, pointing to a file on the table. Phase 2 should begin next week. Agreed, the man in the lab coat replied. But we need more test subjects. The current batch isn't sufficient. Test subjects. The words hit Arjun like a punch to the gut. These weren't just random abductions. They were hunting for children to use in their twisted experiments. And judging by the files scattered across the table, Rohan was likely among them. Before Arjun could process what he'd seen, a sudden noise startled him. A guard entering the hallway, flashlight sweeping across the walls. Panicking, Arjun grabbed Mira's arm and pulled her back toward the exit. They ran as fast as they could, their footsteps muffled only slightly by the dusty floor. Behind them, shouts erupted as the guards realized they weren't alone. Bursting out into the cool night air, Arjun and Mira didn't stop running until they reached the safety of Mira's car. Gasping for breath, they exchanged wide-eyed looks, knowing they'd narrowly escaped disaster. We got what we needed, Arjun said finally, holding up the pen camera. Proof, Mira nodded, tears streaming down her face. For Rohan, she whispered. For all of them. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Arjun allowed himself a flicker of hope. The next morning, Arjun woke up exhausted but wired, his mind replaying the events of the previous night over and over again. Sneaking into that warehouse had been terrifying, but it also felt like a turning point. For the first time since finding the phone, he felt they were getting closer to uncovering the truth, not just about Rohan but about the sinister operation targeting children like him. The pen camera in his pocket was their only hope now, holding evidence that could expose everything. Mira had dropped him off late last night, her face pale with fear and determination. She had promised to meet him early in the morning so they could review the footage together. We need to act fast, she had said before driving away. If those people find out we were there, they'll come after us. Arjun knew she was right. He couldn't afford to waste a single moment. After quickly washing his face and grabbing a piece of stale bread for breakfast, he headed straight to Mira's house. When he arrived, she was already waiting for him, pacing nervously in the living room. On the coffee table lay a laptop, ready to play back the video from the hidden camera. Let's see what we've got, Mira said, her voice tight with anticipation as she plugged the pen camera into the laptop. They huddled close together, holding their breath as the screen flickered to life. The footage wasn't perfect. It was shaky and grainy in parts, but it was enough. It showed the group of men inside the warehouse, their faces clearly visible as they discussed something called Phase 2. One man wearing an expensive suit and tie pointed at documents spread across the table. Another, in a lab coat, nodded along while typing on a laptop. The words test subjects and genetic traits were mentioned multiple times. Most chillingly, there was a brief glimpse of a file labeled Project Phoenix, the same name Arjun had seen in the phone's contacts. This is it, Mira whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. This proves they're using kids for experiments. But who are these people? Arjun asked, his voice trembling. Why would anyone do this? Mira hesitated, then pulled up a news article on her laptop. It featured a photo of the man in the suit, the same one from the video. His name was listed below the image, a high-ranking government official known for pushing controversial policies. Arjun stared at the screen, stunned. How could someone in power be involved in such evil? They're not just criminals, Priya explained later when Mira called her to share the findings. They're operating under the radar, hiding behind positions of authority. That's why no one's caught them yet. So what do we do now? Arjun asked, feeling overwhelmed. How can we stop them? We leak the evidence, Priya replied firmly. But we have to be smart about it. If we go public too soon, or without proper planning, they'll destroy everything and everyone before anyone can intervene. Over the next few days, Arjun, Meera, and Priya worked tirelessly to build a case strong enough to bring down the operation. Priya reached out to trusted journalists and activists, sharing the footage and documents anonymously through encrypted channels. Meanwhile, Meera scoured social media for any mention of missing children, connecting the dots between cases that seemed unrelated until now. And Arjun? He became their eyes and ears on the ground. Using the phone's location history, Arjun identified several other sites linked to the operation, a secluded park where children often disappeared, an abandoned factory, and even a clinic disguised as a free health center. Each place held clues. Each clue added weight to their growing dossier. But gathering information wasn't easy. Every trip outside made Arjun feel like he was being watched. Shadows seemed darker, footsteps louder, strangers more suspicious. Yet he pressed on, driven by the thought of saving Rohan and countless others. One evening, as they reviewed the evidence spread across Meera's dining table, Priya looked at Arjun with newfound respect. You're braver than most adults I know, she said softly. Not many people would risk their lives like this. I'm not doing it for me, Arjun replied, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. I'm doing it for Rohan, for all the kids who don't deserve this. As the days passed, the stakes grew higher. Arjun began noticing subtle changes around him. Strange cars parked near his neighborhood, unfamiliar faces lingering in the market, whispers among neighbors about that boy asking too many questions. Word was spreading, and not in a good way. Whoever ran the operation must have realized someone was onto them. One afternoon, while walking home from school, Arjun spotted a man following him. The man wore sunglasses and carried a newspaper, pretending to read it as he trailed behind. Arjun's heart raced. He ducked into a crowded alley, weaving through vendors and shoppers until he lost sight of the man. But the encounter left him shaken. They knew. Somehow, they knew. That night, Meera and Priya decided it was time to move faster. We can't wait any longer, Meera said urgently. If we delay, they'll silence us, or worse, Priya agreed. I'll send the evidence to international news outlets tomorrow morning. Once it's out, there's no turning back. But it'll force the authorities to act even if some of them are complicit. Arjun nodded, though his stomach churned with nerves. This was it, the moment they'd been working toward. Tomorrow, the world would know the truth. Tomorrow, justice might finally have a chance. But as he lay in bed that night staring at the cracked ceiling above him, Arjun couldn't shake off the feeling that things were far from over. What if the people behind Project Phoenix retaliated? What if they came after him or his mother? What if exposing them didn't stop them? For hours, sleep eluded him. Finally, just as dawn began creeping through the cracks in the wall, he heard a faint knock at the door. His heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour? Cautiously, he crept to the door and peered through the gap. Standing outside was a stranger, dressed in plain clothes, holding a note. Before Arjun could react, the man slipped the paper under the door and disappeared into the shadows. Trembling, Arjun picked up the note. Written in neat handwriting were 3 simple words. Rohan is alive. His breath hitched. Alive? Could it really be true, or was this another trap? Whatever the answer, one thing was certain. Their fight was far from over. The note burned in Arjun's hand like a live coal. Rohan is alive. 3 simple words, yet they carried the weight of 1,000 questions. Was it true? Could Rohan really still be alive after all this time? Or was it a trap meant to lure him into danger? His mind raced as he stared at the paper torn between hope and fear. He woke his mother gently, explaining what had happened. She listened quietly, her face pale with worry. Be careful, Beta, she whispered, gripping his arm tightly. These people are dangerous. Arjun nodded, though his heart was pounding. He couldn't ignore the note. It might be the only chance to save Rohan. Pulling on his shoes, he slipped out of the house and headed toward the meeting point written on the back of the paper. An old park bench near the riverbank. The early morning mist clung to the ground, muffling the sounds of the waking city. Every step felt heavier than the last, his senses sharp and alert for any sign of trouble. When he reached the park, the bench was empty. For a moment, panic surged through him. What if he'd been tricked? But then, from behind a tree, a figure emerged. It was a man, his face partially hidden by a hood. Arjun froze, his fist clenched, ready to run if needed. "Are you alone?" the man asked, his voice low and cautious. "Yes," Arjun replied, his own voice trembling slightly. "Where's Rohan?" The man hesitated, glancing around nervously, before stepping closer. "I can take you to him, but you must trust me. No one else can know about this. Not your mother, not Mira, no one." Arjun's stomach churned. Trust a stranger? After everything he'd been through, it felt impossible, but the thought of leaving Rohan behind was even worse. Swallowing hard, he nodded. "Okay, take me to him." The man led Arjun through winding alleys and narrow streets, staying in the shadows to avoid attention. They walked silently, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, they arrived at an abandoned building, a crumbling structure with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. Inside, the air smelled damp and musty, and the floor creaked under their feet. "Wait here," the man instructed before disappearing into another room. Arjun stood frozen, his heart hammering in his chest. What if this was a setup? What if they were planning to grab him too? But then, a weak voice called out from the darkness. "Arjun!" It was Rohan, thin, pale, and barely able to stand, but unmistakably alive. Arjun rushed forward, pulling the boy into a tight embrace. Tears streamed down his face as relief washed over him. "You're okay," he whispered, holding Rohan tightly. "We're getting you out of here." Rohan shook his head weakly. "No, they'll come after us. They're watching everything." Before Arjun could respond, the man reappeared, holding a small bag. "Take this," he said, handing it to Arjun. "Inside are documents, evidence of what they've done. Use it to expose them, but leave now, if they catch you here." He didn't need to finish. Arjun grabbed the bag and helped Rohan to his feet. Together they stumbled out of the building and into the safety of the streets. Every step felt like a victory, every breath a reminder that they were still free. Back at Mira's house, the reunion was emotional. Rohan collapsed into his mother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably as she held him close. For a long time, no one spoke. They simply let the moment sink in. But soon, reality set in. The fight wasn't over yet. Priya arrived shortly after, her expression grim as she sifted through the documents in the bag. "This is it," she said finally. "Everything we need to shut them down. Names, dates, locations, it's all here." "But how do we make sure they pay?" Arjun asked, his voice firm despite the exhaustion etched on his face. "They have connections everywhere. How do we stop them from hiding again?" "We go big," Priya replied. "International media, human rights organizations, whistleblowers, we hit them from every angle. Once the truth is out, they won't be able to cover it up." Over the next few days, the evidence was leaked to major news outlets across the globe. Headlines screamed about the secret experiments, the missing children, and the powerful figures involved. Protests erupted in the streets, demanding justice for the victims. Authorities, unable to ignore the public outcry, launched investigations that led to arrests, high-ranking officials, scientists, and enforcers alike. For Arjun, the days that followed were a blur. Reporters wanted to interview him, activists hailed him as a hero, and strangers thanked him for exposing the truth. But none of that mattered to him. All he cared about was making sure no child would ever suffer like Rohan had. In the months that followed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Rohan slowly regained his strength, spending hours talking to counselors about his ordeal. Mira threw herself into advocacy work, determined to ensure such horrors never happened again. And Arjun? He returned to school, but he wasn't the same boy who had once wandered the streets scavenging for scraps. He carried himself differently now, with purpose. One evening, as he sat on the rooftop of his shack watching the sunset, his mother joined him. "You've changed, Beta," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What will you do now?" Arjun smiled faintly, looking out at the horizon. "I want to help kids like me," he said. "Kids who don't have anyone to fight for. Them. Maybe I can't change the whole world, but I can try to make it better for some." His mother nodded, pride shining in her eyes. "Then I'll always be here to support you." As the sky turned shades of gold and pink, Arjun felt a sense of peace he hadn't known before. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. He knew that. But, for the first time in his life, he believed he could make a difference. And that belief was enough to keep him moving forward.